Thank you and good morning, everyone. The title of my presentation is the Pallasboy Project. In the time given to me, I'm really just going to give you a brief overview of the work that we've done as part of the Pallasboy Project, and hopefully show you some of the interesting information that's come out of this project. So really just a short background. Ireland has a remarkable organic archaeological resource. Perhaps the best known, I guess, of this might be, see here in the picture, bog bodies. That's the later prehistoric human remains preserved in peatlands. If you've ever been to the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin, you may very well have seen the exhibition there. Perhaps what's less well known is the remarkable array of organic archaeology elsewhere from Ireland. We could have an entire conference just discussing and looking at some of these remarkably preserved artefacts. Just a couple of examples here. So top right we have a late Bronze Age block wheel. That's Ireland's earliest wheel. It's over 3,000 years old. Slightly better known maybe the array of timber trackways that we have from Irish peatlands. There's a couple just here, just as examples. These are late Bronze Age hurdle trackways from Corley in County Longford. These are fantastic hurdle trackways made out of coppice hazel woodland, and these show that people in the Bronze Age were managing woodland 3,000 years ago. We actually have other sites from much earlier, from perhaps 6,000 or 7,000 years ago in Ireland, that show that people in the Mesolithic period, the Middle Stone Age, were probably coppicing woodland then. So our ancestors in Ireland were well aware of the value of wood, of course, and we're also well aware of the importance of conserving it. So it does make you wonder what skills and knowledge we've lost over the years. So the reason for this preservation is the peatland environments that we have in Ireland. Just under 20% of the land area of Ireland is peatland of one form or another, and it's where we have these peatland environments that we have these preservation conditions, saturated, waterlogged conditions, where we have this remarkable organic preservation. And it's worth noting that we don't have this preservation, or we very, very rarely have this preservation on dryland sites. So peatlands are critical in terms of understanding our ancient past, and particularly understanding the use of wooden artefacts and wood in the past. We know from the central peatlands of Ireland, these are the bogs that are cut and drained for peat for use in power stations. And we know there's over 4,000 archaeological sites in the peatland environments there. And almost all of those sites will have some organic components, and most of the time that organic component is wood of one form or another. So, very important in all sorts of ways. So, I'm just going to talk really about one artefact. That's the Pallasboy vessel, as it's known, that came from a bog, from an industrially extracted bog in County Westmeath in 2001. So that's the location of the study site. And here is the Pallasboy vessel. I don't know how well you can make this out, but you can obviously see how good the preservation of this artefact is. Just a few key features of the vessel, if you like. This is an Iron Age vessel. It's over 2,000 years old. It's made out of a black alder, Ulmus glutinosa. Quite an old example of alder, at least 56 years old. It's very old for an alder tree. Some dimensions: about 1.3 metres long by about 0.57 wide, and just under half a metre deep. Due to the preservation that I'm sure you can see in the pictures, remarkable preservation, we can make out the tool marks of the tools that we used to craft the vessel. And we know from the tool mark analysis at least 5 tools were used, and that included a gouge, axe, and a chisel. There's evidence for at least 2 sets of repairs to the vessel. You won't be able to see one of the sets at all, unfortunately, but the vessel split during the initial manufacture and was repaired using tiny wedges, which were then kind of blended into the wood. So almost an invisible repair. There was a later damage to the vessel as well, and slightly cruder repairs of that towards the end of its life. At the end of its life, if that's a good way of talking about this vessel, it was taken to a pool in a peatland in the Iron Age, and it was deposited in a pool and pinned down using hazel stakes. So it's a very unusual vessel. We don't really have many other examples of this sort of artefact from Ireland at all. And there's been quite a lot of discussion over the last 10 years or so about the artefact, about what it was used for, elements of its construction and its function. And this really is the background to the project, I suppose. I used the vessel a lot in my teaching, and I'd find myself saying to the students, find myself making statements about the Pallasboy vessel. I'd say things like, this vessel was obviously made by a very skilled woodworker. And I'm no sort of woodworker at all, and I realised I had really no idea about this vessel, about how long it had taken to make it, how difficult it was to make, in any of these sorts of questions, which really are critical to understanding and interpreting this artefact. And that really was the background to the project, more by sort of luck than judgment. I was having a conversation with my brother, and I was talking about this vessel, and he said, "Oh, you should really talk to my friend Mark Griffiths, who's a woodworker." And I did, and as they say, the rest is almost now history. And we put a small project together, and it's myself, and this is the project team you can see on the slide here. So there's myself there, Katrina Moore, who's a specialist in archaeological wood analyses. There's Mark Griffiths, second right there, and at the end there, Brian McDonald, who's an artist and a photographer. So we put a small project together and put an application into the World Wood Day Fund, and they very generously funded the work. So this is I really must thank them for having the generosity to fund this project. So I'm really just going to give you a brief overview of how the project has gone and show you a few of these fantastic photographs that Brian took in the course of documenting the project. So we began with a viewing of the original vessel at the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin in their conservation facility. This is all that really remains of the vessel you can see here now. Part of the vessel had collapsed during the excavation of it. So you can see it's quite partial remains. We had a very interesting visit to view the vessel, so Mark could look at the vessel and look at the evidence for the woodworking. And we also had a conversation there with, that's Conor McDermott, who was one of the team who excavated the vessel originally. Actually, one of the more difficult parts of the project, and we should probably have guessed this, was finding an example of an older tree that was old enough and big enough to match the original dimensions of the Pallasboy vessel. We eventually tracked one down after quite a lot of time and trouble to a site in County Wicklow in the rather appropriately named Bogwood. And you can see the rather fine example of black alder there before we had it felled. I must admit, this was something we hadn't really thought about, was the fact we were going to fell a very happily growing, rather old alder tree, and that's maybe something we'll return to later. I think really at this stage I'd just say that all the timber that we source from the tree has been used in one form or another, and we're going to plant another alder tree to replace this one. So there was discussions yesterday about sustainability, and I have to say we maybe slightly short-sightedly hadn't really thought about that. Anyway. So we had the timber delivered down to Maethilmara, which was the venue for the woodworking down in Cork City, down in Ireland there, and they're a woodworking shop, and they particularly build boats there. So it was a very appropriate venue. And what was remarkable was when we had the timber delivered, you can see in this picture here, was everyone stopped working straight away. All the woodworkers at Maethilmara were fascinated, and they all came out, and everyone stood around. You can see in this picture, everyone stood around kind of stroking the wood and kind of discussing it. It was remarkable to see from my point of view, just kind of the immediate interest in the wood and the discussions that kind of happened straight away. As part of the project, we decided also to try and be as authentic as possible, and we had a series of replica Iron Age tools specially forged for the job. And indeed, you can see some here. We heard on the first day some discussion of the use of natural stem forms as part of archaeological tools. You can see in the middle of the bench there, just such an example of that. So we had a series of replica tools as well as Mark's modern woodworking equipment, which as it transpired was very important. We basically calculated that it's around about twice as fast to work with a modern axe as it is to work with an Iron Age replica axe, very roughly. And as I've said, and as you can see, the project was thoroughly documented with both still and video photography. We have a short film of the project. I'll give you the link to that later on if you're interested. Thank you. The project began with the splitting of the wood here, as you can see. That's Mark splitting the timber. That seemed to be actually the easiest part of the woodworking. I was quite surprised. I thought that'd be difficult, but the splitting with the wedges was perhaps the quickest and easiest part. What was a lot harder after that was the actual physical work that went into this. And again, I was entirely ignorant of this sort of process. But Mark, being a very experienced woodworker, it really took it out of him, as you'll see very shortly. Very physical work. I learnt the hard way by assisting in the hollowing out of the vessel, and my hands were ruined for days afterwards. I'm clearly far too soft. I need to do more physical work. Alder is a very interesting tree. It has very strong mythical associations in Ireland. It's associated with the birth of the first man, who in Irish mythology sprang out of an alder tree. It's also associated with death. And that, I think, is because the alder tree bleeds when you're working it. You can see in that picture there, there's the red sap that comes out of the tree. So I think certainly the choice of alder wood for the original vessel is very important, and very significant, as we heard in the keynote speech, the significance of wood in cultures in many ways. Something else we were very interested in looking at from a practical archaeological point of view was the tool marks, the marks that different tools left. And that was something we were recording and viewing as the work went on. You can just see some shots of the tool marks there. And as I say, the physicality of this, Mark ended up with cuts on his hands, and I spent a couple of afternoons helping hollow out the log, and that was, as I say, my hands are not long recovered. But what was remarkable was the amount of interest in the project. Everyone who came along was fascinated. We had people dropping in, taking photographs, some really great reactions and responses to the work. And what astonished me was also the amount of wood chips and wood debris that this work produced. This is very interesting from an archaeological point of view, because often archaeologists will count tool marks and archaeological artefacts. And actually what we've learned is that it's entirely pointless, because clearly, if you work wood, you know this, of course, is you can see in this picture how many wood chips are derived from this, from the woodworking. Incidentally, all the wood chips there were taken away. They were gathered up in bags, and I think a lot of people took them away to use as kindling for the fire, which again I think is important in terms of thinking about prehistory. The vessel had a very fine finishing on the outside, this kind of scalloped effect, the original vessel, and that's something that Mark reproduced here. The inside of the vessel was less well finished, which I think is important in terms of how we interpret the vessel. I think it was obviously intended for some form of display. At the end of the working of the project, we took the vessel to display in Cork City Museum, which is where it resides presently. And we took it along there, and it's on display there with a little sign. So really, just to tie up quite quickly, I've just kind of whizzed through things very rapidly there. If you're interested in the project or any of the aspects, then please ask me a question or grab me later on. I think we've learned quite a lot about crafting and processes of crafting, maybe the time these vessels would take to make, or a vessel of this kind would take to make. It was about 72 hours of work for Mark. Again, it's very difficult to kind of extrapolate that back into the Iron Age. But given that maybe you can perhaps work twice as fast with modern tools, it may give you a kind of minimum figure for how long this vessel may have taken to make in the Iron Age. But again, that's speculation, really. As I say, in terms of use and function, there's all sorts of fun you can have with this. And if anyone has any ideas, please give me a shout. Suggestions range from ritual bathing, ritual feasting. One person came along and said it was very reminiscent of a cradle. Perhaps a bit big for a cradle, but certainly you can see that in there as well. And another colleague suggests it's a very small dugout canoe. Not one you could sit in, but one maybe you could kind of tow behind another boat. So all sorts of discussion about that. We used social media extensively as part of the project. If you're interested, we have a Facebook page. Do log on and have a look. There's all sorts of information and resources there, including a link to the video that Brian made of the entire crafting of the project. We've also presented the results at various archaeological conferences. We have a project blog. We also had a feature in Good Woodworking magazine quite recently at the start of the year. I don't know if anyone saw that, but again, that's another interesting output. And finally, as I say, just a few links for you there. There's a link to the video which is on vimeo.com, the blog link, our Facebook page, and also Brian's blog as well. And finally, just to finish off, Brian became so interested in the processes of woodworking and the wood debris that he's actually planning another project using the actual the debris from the splitting and the working of the project. You can see those bits of the Pallasboy tree in his studio there. So the Pallasboy tree has another life. It continues, if you like, and the project will hopefully continue in a variety of other forms. Okay, so I'm going to finish at that point. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, then please give me a shout. Thank you.